to climb.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Condition for Success, Mindset of a Millionaire. We're here joined by Lynn Lionhood of LegalShield and also the host of Networking Lunch with Lynn. So thank you for taking the time out to have with us, Lynn.
Good deal. I'm very happy to be here. You know that, Mark.
No. Yeah. So now I know you always have that like heart of giving and always being, the profound heart of gold. I always tell people, but I kind of want to go back before real quick with, you started networking like 30 past years ago now. It's when you were first starting out in business world, like what created the incentive or the inspiration to start doing networking events in the first place?
Two things. First thing was obviously my husband's accident. I definitely, because of his accident, had said my prayers to God that if he spared him, I would do something every day of my life to help one person. And that would always be somebody that I was not financially connected to or not related to. So that was my first commitment. Secondarily, I tried to figure out how was I going to see some person every day that I didn't know that I could help. And that was going to be difficult to come up with that because I was working a regular job. But somebody at that regular job said to me, well, how about if I take you out and do a networking event? And I didn't know what networking events were. And I said, sure. So I went out for my first networking event as part of AFLAC. And I went out and we set up our table. And I know now it was more like a business event, where everybody had a table for their business. And then people came through and you would talk to them at your table and whatever. But they called it a networking event. And I said, okay. So we set up our tables and there were no people coming through. Nobody. And I didn't know that that was wrong. I wasn't sure what any of this was about. So pretty soon we sat there for about an hour and the vendors were all talking to other vendors. And that's really all we did. And then I heard a bell ring because we're in a restaurant. A bell rang and they made an announcement that everybody should pack up their tables. And I thought, how's this going to help our business? I don't understand it. But I packed up the table and then we all got at this really long set of tables with all this beautiful tablecloths on it. It just looked beautiful. And we were going to have this lunch. And so they served the lunch and I'm not a drinker. I don't care if anybody else is, but I'm not a drinker. I'm not sure if you ever heard this story, Mark. Did you?
I don't think so.
Okay. So pretty soon the music got turned up louder and these were all women and some women started getting up on the table and started dancing and some of them were taking off their clothes. And I said, what is this? How is this going to help our business? So I started watching this and of course they wanted me to join in. I said, I'll be right back. I'm going back to the office. So I gathered up all my stuff and I went to the office and I kept thinking, well, this networking thing, I'm not doing that anymore. That's certainly not a good use of my time. So I was really shocked that for days afterwards, people would invite me to networking events and men would invite me to networking events. And I kept thinking, well, you pigs, I'm not going to a networking event where there's dancing on tables and taking off your clothes. That's not happening. So one day, a good friend of mine who you know, Jeff Morris, asked me if I would go to a networking event. And I kept thinking, oh, that's kind of scummy of him, but I'll go. So I went and it wasn't anything like this. It was a BNI. And I thought, well, that's not like the event that I went to. So I went to the BNI, but I saw there were very stringent rules. And of course, it's always in my nature to contact everybody that went, thank them for the opportunity to be there and follow up. And when I did that, I was promptly contacted by the person who ran the BNI chapter telling me I had no right to reach out to anybody because I was a guest and wasn't a member. And I thought, what's that all about? And she said, well, if you pay this gigantical fee and become a member, then you can reach out to them. And I thought, well, then why did you have guests there? Just to show us like what we could do? I was very shocked. So I sat and I thought about it and I thought, well, that's a great way to meet people. But I sat and made a list of everything I liked about BNI and everything I didn't like about BNI. And I thought, rather than complain about it, why don't you just build your own? So that's what I did. I had no idea if it was going to work or not, but I used my list of the things that I liked. I took the list of the things I didn't like and figured out how I was going to fix those things. And then I threw my first event. And I didn't expect much. 35 people came to my first event, and I was off and running. I loved it. I was scared, but I loved it. And after every event, I would sit down and say, okay, now what if I was a guest? What could I have done better to make the event better? And so I've always been pretty critical of what I did to try to make it get better and better and better. And it just grew. It just grew, and it was amazing. I was able to meet all the people that I needed to meet, and I've never turned back.
You know, I look at with this networking on like the amount of lives that have been impacted and influenced through your light, because it's like it's the way I equip people is like you never know the lives that you'll get to be able to touch, but then when you inspire us and we go on to inspire others and so on and so forth, it just has grown so exponentially. Where I now meet some people, and you know, for anyone that's following us and has seen Amanda Wittenborn's episode, is like Lynn had helped me connect with her, and it's just like you never know on who it's going to be. And even our show's producer was also connected through the same networking thing, so you never know what's going to come from going to networking events. Hopefully you're not going to one of the ones where they're dancing on the table, but that you're going to, you know, but it's just
Leave quick.
yeah. But as seeing what you've built and grown is truly, you know, just amazing. And it's like the but I kind of even want to go back a little further on like, did you ever into like when you were 18, 19 years old, fresh out of like high school, did you ever think that life would ever lead to what it is now?
Not at all. I'm going to tell you honestly, there were many, many times in my life I kept thinking, why am I here? I'm this little hillbilly girl from Whoopsieville, Ohio. What impact will I have on anything in life? I'm just going to be Joe Normal, and there's going to be no impact made anywhere. But you know, God always has a plan for us, and He knows the right time that everything happens. And it didn't happen until I was about 35 that things changed. I mean, before that, I was quiet, I was shy, I was not the person I am today. Could I have spoken in front of people? Never. Never saw this coming at all. And just my biggest aim was to treat people exactly like I would treat them if they had come to my home for an event. I would want them to feel warm and comfortable and wanted. And I always wanted them to know how much I appreciated and that I was grateful for this introduction to them. Right now, I say that everybody who comes to my event, I believe, is a blessing from God. I don't know how half of them find me, but I think that that has served me well, because in the beginning, you don't really think you're making an impact on people's lives. But it's like the last 3 or 4 years, the stories have been incredible that are coming back to me from people saying, you changed everything in my life, Lynn. I didn't know what networking was. Kind of like when I met you, Mark. I remember you telling me you weren't sure kind of what networking was all about. And I told you, I gave you some advice and you took it very well. But I've had lots of people throughout these years come and say, I'm nervous. I've never done this before. I said, I'm glad you're telling me that. That just tells me I need to put my arm around them and make sure that I make them feel extra comfortable and that I make it easier for them to feel like they can just be themselves. And I've always given advice to people because I've always been pretty successful in whatever it was I did, but I never really fit the mold and did it the way I was supposed to do it. I just saw things differently. So I would tell people, you know, gee, if I were in your business, this is what I would do. And they've taken my suggestions, and most times it's always worked out really, really well. But to hear people come back and say, my business changed, my life changed, the connections you've made were incredible for me. It lets me know that I'm making that difference that I always wondered if I would ever make a mark anywhere. And so I'm positive this is what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I do remember. I always remember when first meeting. It's like that after the event ended, you're like, Mark, hang back a second, and because you wanted to speak with me on, you know, learning about why I came to the event, learning more about my business specifically, and the fact that like I think yours was like the third, maybe fourth event that I had gone to since from networking, and realizing that one, nobody bothered to ask that from either the other events. And two is the fact that, you know, um, like most of the other events, like everybody seemed to already know each other and kind of just clicked with each other. So you couldn't really get your word in because it's like, well, how do I say what I do when they all know each other and already talking? It's like for you to allow every single person to speak was something that I'm sure after this airs, we're going to be having a lot more guests on your events. So as far as where'd they come from, it's like, oh, that episode you did. uh, but I look at it's the conditioning I'm teaching people about is so before 35, you were conditioned to be this, quiet little, like you said, is the girl from Ohio, and
Yep.
now everybody knows. Oh, Lynn Lionhood, I know her. It's like, how do you know her? Your name is becoming to this point where you're almost a celebrity kind of.
Oh God. Hey, you know what? Let's go back to what you just said too, because that was really important to me. When you said you went to events and people were like in little cliques, I saw that myself too. And I thought I have to fix that. So towards the end, before COVID hit, I had come to the realization that there were a lot of people that would come to my events. In fact, there was an attorney and his wife that would come. Do you remember? He was an attorney, and I forget what she did. She did some sort of a like kind of a creative kind of a thing. She made items that she sold or something. But these people would come and they would eventually gravitate to tables with people that they knew. So I began to change it up. I would let them all go get their seats. And then I would tell them to look down at their name tags. And I would say, you have a letter of the alphabet on it, which to me signified a color. I picked like 3 colors. Like, let's say it's red, yellow, blue. And I would say, if you are an R, go to the table that has an R on it. So this was purposely putting people at tables that they might not have ever sat at. And I switched them all up, or I made them do it by numbers. There would be 1, 2, 3 written on the corner of their name tag, and they'd never noticed it. And I said, if you're a 1, go to the 1 tables. If you're a 2, go to the 2 tables. But I always changed it up. If your birthdays fell in these 3 months, go to this table, go to that table. And I purposely did that so that people were always with people that they didn't know, because that was what the whole point of coming was. This was not like a birthday party where you sat with the people that you liked the best. This was about getting to know new people and sharing new ideas. And it's the reason why I had everybody shoot dice at the end. I said, I never saw networking events that you did stuff like that. I said, look, I want them to come there. They're spending 3 hours with me. I want them to go home so exhausted they can't go to another networking event. They have to go home and they have to be exhausted. And as they're laying there, I want them to run through what they did during the day. And I wanted them to have contact information from every person. That's another thing that I found networking in groups wouldn't let you do. They wouldn't give you, that meant work on their part to make sure that you got all the contact information from everybody else. But I figured, how great would that be? If you're going to go to a networking event, chances are you're going to get to know the people on either side of you pretty good. Or if you're at a table, you might get to know a few of the people at the table, but you're not even going to get to meet the people at the other tables. So you're like, why am I in an event with 60 people? You're not going to meet 60 people. So I said, I think I'm going to start teaching them the right way to network. I'm going to make sure they get information on everybody and that they reach out to everybody. Do some follow-ups to this meeting. Don't let it be this meeting and that's it. And I think it's had a very good effect. A lot of people have really learned to network in a different way. And I think that's good for them. It's good for their businesses.
Touching on the teaching part, I was going to say earlier, I think that is part of why your networking events are always so warm and welcoming, because it's kind of like being it reminds a lot, for at least for myself, that experience of being in school back in elementary school, where the teacher is, oh, go talk with this person, go talk about, and the fact that you did that with the tables, where if you don't know that person, well, let's go sit down with them. And even teachers I've heard express about how they'll be having a class of people, and years later they'll come back and say, hey, listen, you were one of my favorite teachers, you really changed my life. And you're experiencing that now, where people that you influenced years ago are coming back to you now and saying, hey, you helped me, to get out of my shell, so I want to thank you for that. And
That's
so
good.
it's that circle around of things. But touching point on the point of the success that you've had, it's like, what's your personal definition of success? I know everybody's got their own definition. So it's like, what is Lynn Lionhood's
I
definition of
heard a
success?
quote years ago that has always been my most favorite quote, and I live by this. And the quote was out of that book. Oh, come on. Why am I drawing it? The Slight Edge. And the quote was that successful people will always do the things that unsuccessful people won't do. And I believe that with all my heart. Unsuccessful people quit so easily. The world is all crappy to them and everything is all against them and blah, blah, blah. It's not true. It's not true. It's your attitude. Successful people will hit a brick wall and back up a step and go, wait a minute, that didn't work. Let me try going to the right or going to the left. Whatever it takes, they know what the goal is that they want to get to, and they're going to keep barreling through, even if it means that going to the right and left didn't work and they have to go over that wall. They'll do whatever it takes. Unsuccessful people are almost looking for an excuse to be unsuccessful because I hate to say it, some people like to whine. They just do. And they're looking for a reason to whine. And if you take that reason away, they're very unhappy. They want that reason back so they can whine that, the system's against me and it's never going to work. And you find that everywhere in the world. That's why those people were cut out to be employees, not business owners, not entrepreneurs. Those people need to be told, over there's the hamburger, you pick it up and you take it to the grill and you put it on the grill and then it goes on the bun and the mayonnaise goes on it. They have to be told what to do and they can follow orders very well. The people who say, well, gee, that worked. I know how to make that hamburger, but I think I can make that hamburger better if I did XYZ. Those are the people who were never meant to be an employee. Being an employee is there for one reason in their lives, and that is to show them what they don't want. They've learned that regimented schedule right there of somebody telling you what to do and how to do it and when to do it is not for me. I can work just as hard, if not harder. If I really want success, I'll work a little harder for myself and I'll obtain much better results. So it's pretty easy after you've talked to somebody for about an hour, you can tell whether they were cut out to be an entrepreneur or to be an employee.
Now, I've asked a few people before of this is, do you feel that entrepreneurship is something that is instilled at birth, basically like a talent that you're either you have it or you don't, or it's a skill that you can develop over time?
I think it's a skill, to be honest with you. I think we're all born with nothing. We're born with nothing. We're like a blank slate. I don't care what other people say. That's what I believe. I believe we don't know how to feed ourselves. We don't know how to walk. We don't know how to talk. We don't know how to do anything. And we slowly learn those skills. Some people learn them better than others. Look, some of these people learn to walk and then they learn to run at speeds that I can't do. They learn to do things and excel in different areas. So I think that it helps if you have parents that believe in being an entrepreneur, because there are some kids that are told from the very beginning that that's just not for them. Entrepreneur is not the way to go. You need to be a doctor, you need to be a lawyer, and just kind of keep you on that path. And those people might have had great entrepreneurial skills, but would never know it. And so I believe it's something that you learn. And for some of us, it's learned through poor experiences as an employee. Like I said, very frustrating experiences as an employee. We may have been an employee who was an overachiever, showed up early, stayed late, always did anything extra that was asked out of them, but no appreciation was ever shown for any of that extra effort. You were basically given the same treatment as the guy over here who showed up late consistently, left early consistently, spent the day on the phone talking to his friends, goofed off. You both got the same pay, and you kept saying, how's that work? And pretty soon after a while, you start saying, you know what? Somebody shows you an entrepreneurial opportunity and you go, well, let me try that. And you're scared because you're not sure it's going to work. Because let me tell you, entrepreneurship is really not cut out for everybody, because you're stepping outside of a guaranteed check every single week, and you eat what you kill. If you do nothing, there is nothing. If you're willing to go out and forage in the forest and bring something back, you could eat very well.
If you have a person who's in the job world and looking at being an entrepreneur, or maybe someone who just lost their job but have thought about in the past being an entrepreneur, what would be your suggestion to them on how to start, in addition to going to your networking events, on becoming an entrepreneur and starting a business of their own?
Couple things I would tell them. I would say, let me ask you one quick question that will tell me everything. Have you ever sat at the job that you had or gave up or whatever? Have you ever been there where you looked at the boss and thought, you know what, I could do what they're doing and I could probably do it better? If you've ever had that thought, what have you ever done to pursue that? Have you done anything to pursue it? Because you may have said, well, they were looking for someone to replace that position at one point, and I put in an application for it and I didn't get accepted. So you just accepted that somebody else made the decision that you weren't good enough for that position. What if somebody gave you that opportunity and you could prove to that boss that you really were the caliber person that they didn't believe you were? If you ever have had that thought before, then you're a candidate for an entrepreneur. But I would say, number two, you need to understand it's not a job, it's an opportunity. And unless you put in twice as much effort as you would as an employee, you'll get nothing out of it. You'll be disappointed. I would say to them that another good thing for them to do is to do exactly what you didn't think they should do. I think they should come if they were, let's say they were terminated or they left, what doesn't matter? Go to a networking event. And I'm going to tell you why. I've had a couple of people have that position and say, I can't come back to your networking event because I don't have a company to represent. I said, listen, you're not there to represent a company. That is the best place for you to be. And I'll tell you why. I think it's like going to a smorgasbord. You go there, there's going to be 40 people. They're going to all talk about their businesses. I'll guarantee you that the great majority of them, probably about 95% of them, have a job opportunity. For a few, it will be a job. For the majority, it will be an opportunity, a business opportunity. So you can go like you're sitting at the smorgasbord table. When it comes your turn, you just tell them, I'm exploring my opportunities. I'm not with my former company. I'm not attached to anything. I'm pursuing looking at what's here. And you listen carefully to what every one of those people tell you. Do I think you should run right into business with Mark Bartosik immediately? No, I don't think you should do that. I think you should have conversations with each and every one of these people. Ask all the questions you want. I think you should try 3 or 4 of the opportunities, the ones that are at the top of your list that interest you the most. Go find those opportunities and give them a try. And it's just like going out to find, for a woman, to go out and find the perfect dress for this perfect event. Or for a man, it might be a suit or new shoes. It's not always going to be that first one that you try on. That won't necessarily be the case. You might have to try on 10 or 12. You might get a little frustrated in the process. Maybe you're lucky and you hit it on the third try. But you have to go through that process, because whatever decision you're making is going to be the decision, hopefully, that you're going to stick with for good. Now, personally, I think you should always have multiple sources of income. Even if you're very happy in your job, you should have multiple sources of income. Have something else on the side so that when disaster hits, no saying that's going to happen, but you know what? Disaster is just that. It doesn't come where it says, guess what? On October 13th, 2027, you're going to have a disaster hit and you're not going to have any income from that job anymore. You don't know that. You don't know when that's going to happen. That day, you may have an accident that ends your career forever with what it is you're doing now that you're so happy with. But if you have a secondary income coming in that you can fall back on, you won't be hurt quite as badly. You're going to take a hit, but you're not going to be hit quite as badly, and you'll feel comfortable with that secondary thing. I would then at that point go get myself a new secondary thing and make that your primary thing. But I would say that you have to be prepared. And I learned that the hard way when my husband, who was our sole source of income at the time, had that go away from him completely. I realized with 4 kids to raise and him and I, there was no income coming in. This was not the way to go. And I said, even when I got a job, I said, I need to find something that I can do on the side so I have multiple sources of income. So that's a smart thing to do.
Yeah, I always feel for the story. For those that don't know, definitely jump in on one of Lynn's networking with Lynn's Zooms and hear more about her story as far as with her and her husband, because it's really what helped all of this take off from. And it's as tragic as it was, but it's like, but it is truly turned into that, bittersweet blessing in the tragedy, because like you took that event and created all of this that you have now, as far as the LegalShield business that you were, I think you said you were number two twice, and you were number one performer one year, as like, and then you got networking for 30 plus years and helped so many people inspire their lives. So it's like, I look at it as like, maybe that was the, God's message to go help more people. I don't know. We never know on the
I
fuller
think you're
things.
right. I think you're right. You know what? When disaster hits, you have to realize that God doesn't make mistakes. He's teaching you something. And there are people that have a bad whatever. I mean, look, I'm not the first person to have some sort of a horrible thing happen in their lives. Probably everybody's got a story that something happened. But you have to ask yourself, some people get stuck in that mode and can't get out of it. Case in point, I have a sister-in-law who lost a baby after 6 hours after birth. The baby died. She folded up her tent and went home. It broke up the marriage between my brother and her. She never remarried. She never got over the death of that child. She just never moved forward. She has spent her whole life centered around how horrible that event was and never moved forward. Yet I know people who've had a very similar incident. I'm going to give you an example. I have a friend who's a grief coach, and she lost a 4-year-old son. Now, she knew that child for 4 years. He went into the hospital with something that should have been pretty easy to get through, with a heart operation, and he didn't survive it. And she had a newborn baby, and she had a 6-year-old at home. So she had to go home and explain to the 6-year-old why his little brother that he played with all the time was never going to come home. She had to deal with the grief of her and her husband as she was trying to mother a new baby. And instead of letting that consume her life, she turned that into something very positive. It took a while before she realized it, but she turned it into something positive and decided to become a grief coach, not a grief counselor, but a grief coach, to help people through the loss of a child, of a spouse, of a neighbor, a friend, a brother, a sister, a job, an opportunity, the loss of anything in your life, even a pet. To a lot of people, that pet can be everything, and it can stymie your life and stop you in your tracks. So she turned it into something very positive. I know lots of people who've had tragedy and turned it into something positive. So my bottom belief is God is trying to teach you something. If you don't realize what the lesson is and do some thinking on that and learn the lesson, you will never move beyond where you are at that point. If you do learn the lesson, you will move beyond it, and you will go back and look at that event and realize the strength you gained from having gone through that event.
That's I look at it now, it's the profoundness. And I know we're almost out of time. I do want to share that it reminds me of a quote Tony Robbins said, that is like, the past does not equal your future unless you live there. And so to remind all of the viewers,
that's a good one. That's a good one, Mark.
I know Lynn loves me for all the quotes I remember, but like,
I don't know how you do it.
That's what was given to me to do, was besides the gift of gab, but also memorizing all this motivation. So for those following, there's plenty more motivation. Follow for more, but do know that whatever your life is, you can turn it around by simply putting it forward to make your story your story. So we'll see you next time on Condition for Success.
Beautiful.
Start the clock, the race